So imagine this. You have a world-famous Italian author, right? And he's spending months traveling all across 1959 America.
Right, just crisscrossing the country.
Exactly. And he is meticulously documenting absolutely everything he sees. He's treating the United States not as like a tourist destination, but as this vast, incredibly complex sociological experiment.
Yeah, he's really observing it.
We're talking about a man who is watching the gritty, rapidly mechanizing reality of Wall Street computers one day, and then he's standing literally on the front lines of the birth of the civil rights movement the next.
It's an incredible contrast.
It really is. He's cataloging the strange performative habits of Greenwich Village beatniks. He's analyzing the endless alienating sprawl of the American highway. And he's dissecting the completely bizarre artificiality of Hollywood.
Oh, the Hollywood stuff is wild.
It is. And so he writes this incredible book about it. It's this vivid, completely unfiltered snapshot of a superpower in transition.
And then pulls it.
Right at the very last second, right at the second proof stage with the publisher, he pulls the book from publication entirely.
Which is just unheard of.
Why? Because he thought it simply wasn't literary enough.
Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's really one of the more remarkable literary mysteries of the 20th century, I think. And it sets the stage perfectly for what we are going to explore today.
Yeah.
Because we are looking at an extraordinary collection of texts from the legendary Italian writer Italo Calvino. Specifically, we're diving into his posthumously published collection, Hermit in Paris, autobiographical writings.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sources we've gathered to share with you today include his highly detailed, totally unpublished American diary from 1959 to 1960.
Right.
As well as his profound and melancholic reflections on his mentor Cesare Pavese, and a deeply revealing, almost confessional piece titled Political Autobiography of a Young Man.
What's fascinating here is the sheer volume of Calvino's observations in these texts. It's staggering. Our mission today is to essentially borrow Calvino's eyes. Right. We want to understand his political and personal coming of age. And at the same time, we are taking you, our listener, on a fascinating, completely unfiltered road trip through mid-century America. We're going to see the United States exactly as he saw it. The good, the bad, the deeply contradictory, and the utterly bizarre.
And just a quick note as we dive in, Calvino's diaries from this period are entirely unfiltered. They were never meant to be polished historical essays.
Right, they were just raw notes.
Exactly. So we're going to be looking at his firsthand, very raw accounts of severe racial segregation in the American South, as well as his own complex personal ties to communism and fascism back in Europe.
Yeah.
Our goal today is strictly to look through his specific historical lens and report what he documented. We're exploring the history and his ideology purely as an observer.
Yeah, we aren't taking any sides here.
Right. Without endorsing the politics on either side of the spectrum, we simply want to see the 20th century exactly as he experienced and recorded it.
Absolutely. And to understand those recordings, we really have to start with the mystery of the reluctant autobiographer himself.
The backstory is so good.
It's beautifully highlighted in his widow Esther Calvino's preface to the book. It's so captivating because it shows a master of fiction completely paralyzed by the idea of his own reality.
Yeah.
So picture this. It's August 1985. Calvino is about to leave for a trip to Harvard University to deliver a highly anticipated series of lectures.
But he's exhausted.
Incredibly tired. He's anxious. He's struggling with the lecture material, constantly fiddling with the order of his notes, making endless corrections. But he feels like he's making absolutely no progress.
Right. And when he is gently asked by his family why he doesn't just leave the Harvard lectures alone for a moment and finish his autobiographical work, a book that was to be called The Road San Giovanni, his response is incredibly telling.
What does he say?
He says, because that's my biography, and my biography is not yet, and he just trails off. He never actually finishes the sentence. You have to wonder, was he going to say it wasn't finished? Or that the events of his life didn't neatly encapsulate his entire identity?
It's a haunting detail.
Yeah.
And what makes it so intriguing for our deep dive today is that years later, they find a specific folder on his desk titled Autobiographical Pieces.
He had saved it all.
Meticulously prepped.
Oh.
This collection of texts, complete with handwritten notes, covered his life up to 1980. The explicit intention of this folder was to explain his political, literary, and existential choices.
He wanted to document exactly how, why, and when they happened.
Almost as if he was trying to build a defense for his own life's trajectory before he ran out of time.
The when is the crucial element there, because Calvino himself noted in these margins that the convictions expressed in these pieces are only the testimony of what he believed at that particular time, not necessarily what he believed decades later.
Right.
And this brings us right back to why he pulled his American travel book in 1961. It was going to be titled An Optimist in America.
Catchy title.
Very. But he wrote to a friend that, rereading the manuscript at the proof stage, he felt it was too slight as a work of literature and not original enough to be a work of journalistic reportage.
So it fell in this weird middle ground.
Exactly. It didn't fit neatly into a genre. Yet, ironically, as an autobiographical document, this diary is absolutely essential to understanding him. It is arguably his most spontaneous, direct self-portrait, precisely because he wasn't trying to be overly literary.
He was just trying to report the physical reality of America to his colleagues back home.
Right.
But to really understand Calvino's lens on America, we have to unpack where he came from and the very specific intellectual armor he was wearing when he arrived.
His background is pretty unique.
He was born in Cuba, actually, to parents who were both dedicated scientists. His father was an agronomist and his mother was a botanist. But he was raised in the lush, coastal Ligurian town of San Remo in Italy.
A very specific kind of environment.
It was a household where rigorous scientific inquiry was revered, and literature was viewed as almost a frivolous afterthought. He actually refers to himself as the black sheep of his family, purely for wanting to pursue the arts.
Yeah.
But when it came time to adopt a city as his intellectual and professional home, he completely rejected the romantic, sun-drenched landscapes of his youth. He chose Turin.
He did, and he explicitly states why he needed that contrast. He was drawn to Turin's moral, civic image. He deeply appreciated its complete lack of what he called romantic froth.
Right, no fluff.
Exactly.
Right.
Turin was an industrial powerhouse. It relied on hard work, and the people had an innate diffidence and reserve. For Calvino, Turin represented the big world of historical action, a rational, clarifying intelligence that was entirely distinct from the closed, gossipy provincial life he grew up in.
And more importantly, Turin wasn't just a place. It was embodied for him by one specific person.
The writer, Cesare Pavese.
Pavese is a massive, almost gravitational figure in Calvino's life. He wasn't just a friend, he was the ultimate mentor.
He really was.
Pavese was the one who actually taught Calvino the day-to-day profession of publishing. He introduced him to the Einaudi publishing house, which was the premier left-wing intellectual publisher in post-war Italy, a place where Calvino would work for decades.
Pavese was the very first reader of all of Calvino's early pages, the one who shaped his raw talent.
It's a dynamic that really makes you consider how a mentor shapes not just your skills, but how you perceive the world itself.
For Calvino, Pavese's profound influence went far beyond just editing sentences or fixing grammar. Pavese possessed this deep, tragic despair about the world, yet he paired it with an intense, almost punishingly rigorous work ethic.
He believed that the culture of the man of letters had to be transformed into productive work, right?
Exactly, into concrete values put at the service of society. That was the primary lens through which Calvino first evaluated both literature and society. He absorbed Pavese's style, which was simultaneously poetic and deeply, stubbornly moral.
But then there was the tragedy.
Yes. When Pavese tragically took his own life in 1950, it left a permanent, indelible mark on Calvino. It embedded a sense of tough, unsentimental reality into his worldview.
He learned that literature couldn't just be escapism. It had to grapple with the heavy machinery of the real world.
And it is precisely that unsentimental, highly analytical worldview that Calvino packs in his suitcase when he finally crosses the Atlantic.
Which brings us to November 1959. Calvino is heading to America on a prestigious Ford Foundation grant.
Yep.
But he doesn't take a modern transatlantic flight. He actively chooses the slowest possible method of arrival, a transatlantic ocean liner. And almost immediately, he is absolutely miserable.
His description of that ocean voyage is wonderfully cynical. He calls it the absolute peak of American boredom, a kind of desperate, inescapable tedium.
He hated it so much.
He bitterly regrets not taking a plane. He's lamenting that he is arriving in the land of the future, the land of big business and speed, already weighed down by an antiquated old-world lethargy.
He even compares the profound boredom of the liner to the pacing of a Chekhov play.
Right. Feeling totally out of phase with the forward momentum of 20th century history.
But the very second he actually lands in New York, that lethargy vanishes. The sheer physical shock of the city completely wakes him up.
New York hits him hard.
He describes New York as the most spectacular sight on Earth, but he doesn't describe it like a gleaming city of tomorrow. He is overwhelmed by the gray, fin de siècle skyscrapers.
Yeah, the older architecture.
He notes that the density and the architecture make New York look almost like a massive, abandoned German city from 3,000 years in the future. The sheer scale, the verticality, and the electric grinding energy of the place hit him like a physical force.
It's a complete sensory overload for a European intellectual accustomed to the horizontal historic plazas of Italy.
So different.
He dives right into the heart of it all, setting up base in Greenwich Village. Interestingly, he opts for a clean, respectable, almost Henry James-style room at the Grosvenor Hotel.
Not the bohemian life.
Right, he avoids the squalid, down-at-heel bohemian places his Ford Foundation handlers initially try to suggest for an artist. And it's here in the village that he begins to mix with some truly bizarre characters, giving us a hilarious, incredibly sharp cross-section of the 1950s avant-garde.
The travel companions he is grouped with on this grant are an absolute riot. The standout is the Spanish writer Fernando Arrabal.
Oh, Arrabal is a fascinating, deeply contradictory character.
He's 27, small, baby-faced, and a former Jesuit student who has been living in Paris. Calvino notes that Arrabal absolutely hates politics, and he absolutely hates sex.
He tells Calvino he cannot even conceive of people who find either of those topics interesting.
Literally all Arrabal cares about are watching CinemaScope gangster movies and playing pinball.
Pinball and gangsters, that's it.
But he desperately wants to be Europe's scandalous teddy boy, constantly making these lugubrious, shocking jokes to try and provoke people.
And this desire to be the ultimate provocateur leads to a brilliantly awkward encounter that shatters Arrabal's entire facade.
I love this story.
So, Calvino attends a cocktail party in Greenwich Village, hosted by Barney Rossett. Rossett is the legendary publisher of Grove Press. He's this daring, avant-garde figure who is actively championing and publishing the controversial Beat Generation writers.
Okay.
Walking into this very party is Allen Ginsberg, whom Calvino vividly describes as wearing a dirty white t-shirt under a dark suit, sporting a straggly black beard, and accompanied by a massive crowd of even dirtier, heavily bearded beatniks.
And the beatniks immediately spot Arrabal.
Right.
Because Arrabal is sporting this little meticulously groomed Parisian under-the-chin beard. The American beatniks think, a kindred spirit, one of us.
Yeah.
They invite him over, and they actually try to seduce him.
That goes so wrong for him.
Ginsberg apparently tries to get Arrabal to come with them to witness some, quote, bearded couplings. Calvino returns to his hotel later that night to find Arrabal absolutely terrified. This Spanish writer, who came to America trying to be the ultimate scandalous European provocateur, is completely shattered. He is deeply scandalized by his first real encounter with the actual, uninhibited American avant-garde. The tough teddy boy persona instantly vanishes, and he reverts right back to the frightened ex-seminary student.
It perfectly illustrates the clash of cultures. The European idea of bohemian rebellion, which was often deeply intellectual and theoretical, versus the American beat movement, which was incredibly visceral, physical, and transgressive.
Totally different worlds.
But while he is spending his evenings mingling with the bohemians, Calvino's daytime focus reveals his true analytical nature. He is deeply focused on the machinery of American capitalism, particularly how it applies to the publishing industry.
Right, he's a publishing guy at heart.
He visits massive publishing houses like Random House and Macmillan, taking meticulous, almost scientific notes on exactly how they operate. He breaks down the distinct functions of the editorial department, the art department, the publicity department.
And he's shocked by the money.
He notes with absolute shock that to successfully launch a major bestseller in America at that time, a publisher needed a promotional budget of $500,000.
Which was an astronomical, almost incomprehensible sum for a European writer who was used to the boutique, ideologically driven publishing houses of Turin.
And there's a fantastic, almost tragicomic irony here regarding his own book, The Baron in the Trees.
Yes.
He meets with the Random House executives while he's in New York to find out why his book isn't available in any of the Fifth Avenue bookstores. The executives sheepishly reveal that Random House had just invested heavily in installing these brand new, state-of-the-art IBM distribution machines.
But the machine suffered a massive malfunction.
Exactly. So instead of sending copies of Calvino's brilliant fantasy masterpiece to the prominent New York bookshops, the computers routed dozens of copies to tiny rural farming villages in Nebraska.
It's just so funny to picture these Nebraska farmers getting boxes of Italian fantasy literature. But for Calvino, it points to a massive systemic structural shift that he's witnessing in real time.
Right. He isn't just amused by the computer error. He wants to see the brain behind it.
So he actually goes down to Wall Street and secures a tour of the financial titan, Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith, which has just transitioned to operating entirely electronically.
He gets to see the whole setup.
He is taken to the top floor of the skyscraper to see their new pride and joy, the massive IBM 705 computer. And true to form, he writes down the exact, staggering specifications.
He loves the data.
He notes that in a single minute, it can perform 504,000 additions or subtractions, and it can execute over 1.7 million logical decisions. He watches in complete awe as the technicians explain that this single machine has the capacity to read the entire text of Gone with the Wind and copy it onto a tiny spool of magnetic tape in exactly 3 minutes.
This is mind-blowing for the time.
He writes that the physical memory of the machine looked like a delicate piece of cloth woven with thousands of tiny colored threads. He realizes he is looking at the absolute cutting edge of human technology, a brain that is completely devoid of human error or emotion.
Exactly. And this is where Calvino's insights elevate from mere observation to profound structural analysis. He realizes that he is witnessing the exact moment America transitions into the digital hyper-capitalist age.
It's a turning point.
He understands that this vast, invisible network of machines and data processing is the new beating heart of the American empire. He even wryly advises his intellectual friends back in Italy that before sending their children to university to study classical philosophy or music, they should instead send them to apprentice at Merrill Lynch to learn how the real world actually operates.
That's amazing.
He recognizes that the relentless, systemic pursuit of capital, perfectly managed by these flawless electronic brains, is what truly governs American society, far more than its politicians or its artists.
But of course, as fascinating as Wall Street is, Calvino knows he can't understand America just by looking at New York.
You have to get out of the city.
Right. So he packs his bags and heads out to the Midwest, venturing into the absolute engine room of that consumerism, Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago. And his immediate reaction upon arriving is total spatial and cultural confusion.
He's just lost.
He writes in his diary, "Where is the city?" Because unlike European cities with their centralized historic plazas, ancient cathedrals, and dense walkable cores, the American Midwest is just endless, sprawling decentralization.
It's an environment designed entirely around the automobile, not the human being.
He describes driving for hours upon hours past massive used car lots, strung with incredibly bright, garish-colored flags, feeling like he's navigating an alien landscape.
He observes the architecture of the middle class, noting that they live in these endless, repetitive avenues of two-story houses that all look virtually identical. Each has its mandatory patch of green lawn and a driveway built to accommodate 2 or 3 massive cars.
Classic American dream image.
He breaks down the sociology of it. The man goes to work at the factory or the office, comes home precisely at 5 p.m., puts on his slippers, and sits down to watch television. It's a society constructed entirely of isolated, self-contained family units.
And this profound consumer isolation is perfectly, almost hauntingly symbolized by something he discovers while wandering the aisles of the massive Sears supermarkets.
The TV dinner.
The TV dinner completely fascinates him. He sees these little compartmentalized aluminum trays filled with complete pre-cooked meals wrapped in color photographs. He studies the marketing and realizes they're designed specifically so that a family can take the tray out of the freezer, heat it up, and eat it without ever having to look away from the television screen for even 10 minutes.
What's vital here is how Calvino interprets this. For him, the TV dinner isn't just a quirky, convenient new food product. It is a profound philosophical symbol. It represents a society so entirely hooked on glowing screens, convenience, and constant entertainment that they are willing to sever the most basic, fundamental human ritual of preparing and sharing a meal together.
It's the ultimate manifestation of the isolation he felt in those sprawling suburbs. You don't even need to look at your family while you eat anymore.
But Calvino is too sharp to just look at the middle-class consumer paradise. He actively looks beneath the veneer of the aluminum trays and the manicured lawns.
Right, he goes looking for the shadows.
He pays very close attention to what he categorizes as American poverty, and he draws a stark, depressing contrast between what he sees in the Midwest and what he saw back in New York.
How so?
In New York, the poverty of the new immigrants arriving off the boats felt like a waiting period poverty. It was tough, yes, but it felt like a temporary dynamic struggle on the inevitable way toward assimilation and upward mobility.
There was hope in it.
Exactly. But in the industrial Midwest, he discovers something entirely different. Structural, entrenched, inescapable poverty. He sees endless rows of faded, decaying wooden slums. He watches old men pushing handcarts full of scavenged scrap wood through the freezing streets.
It's bleak.
He documents the fierce, highly territorial racial and ethnic displacement where crumbling neighborhoods constantly violently shift from Jewish to Black, from Italian to Mexican, as each group tries to claw its way out of the industrial underbelly.
He really gets a raw, unfiltered taste of this gritty reality when he decides to spend an evening in a rough working-class bar in Cleveland.
Oh, this scene is so vivid.
He sits quietly in the corner, observing the patrons. He sees factory workers who look physically broken by the assembly line. He watches women who look completely worn down by life, their faces etched with exhaustion.
That's a tough crowd.
He describes a surreal scene of a guy in a beret dancing erratically with an older woman right next to a glowing jukebox and a row of mechanical bingo machines. He starts talking to people and learns that the bar is heavily frequented by poor white Southerners who had migrated north in desperate search of work in the auto and steel factories.
And they just didn't find the dream they were looking for.
They arrive in the promised land of the North, only to find themselves at the absolute bottom of a brutal social ladder. And Calvino notes that their simmering resentment is palpable in the room. It's a striking, deeply sobering contrast to this sanitized, gleaming American dream being advertised on the televisions in the suburbs just a few miles away.
That's a fascinating contradiction, though. He's looking at the absolute pinnacle of modern industrial wealth, yet seeing profound structural poverty.
Right. Did he view the corporations themselves as purely sinister in how they handled their workforce, or was it more nuanced than that?
It was incredibly nuanced, which brings us to one of the most compelling stops on his tour, his visit to Poughkeepsie, New York, to tour another massive IBM factory. Yeah.
This facility employs 10,000 people, and what he finds there completely astounds him because it represents the other side of the industrial coin, absolute paternalistic capitalism.
He describes it almost like a medieval fiefdom.
Exactly.
He arrives at the facility and is immediately confronted by a parking lot holding 4,000 cars. When he sits down with the executives and asks them how they negotiate with the trade unions, the managers look at him and tell him flat out, "We don't need them."
No unions at all.
The workers are highly paid, and the company provides absolutely everything they could ever want. Calvino notes there is a quasi-religious, cult-like reverence for the founder, Mr. Thomas J. Watson. There are literal color portraits of Watson hanging in every single room and hallway.
It's intense.
Calvino learns that the paternalism extends far beyond the factory floor. For the company Christmas party, if a worker doesn't have a car to bring his wife, the management simply sends one.
Oh.
If the wife doesn't have a suitable evening gown, the management provides a catalog and buys her one. They even guarantee and pay for the babysitters. They control everything.
And the most surreal detail, when Mr. Watson enters a room, every single employee is expected to stand up and sing a special company-mandated song in his honor.
As you listen to this, I encourage you to think critically about the psychological trade-off happening here. Calvino immediately compares this setup to the enlightened capitalism of Adriano Olivetti back in Italy, who also tried to build utopian corporate towns.
The Olivetti type bars and typewriters.
Right. Calvino recognizes that beneath the futuristic, abstract beauty of the computers being built, which he again describes poetically as cascades of colored threads and glowing tubes, there is a deeply medieval, rigidly paternalistic social structure at play.
It's a completely closed loop.
The corporation takes care of your every physical and financial need, but in return, it demands total, unwavering loyalty and complete behavioral conformity. It effectively eliminates the dialectic of the class struggle.
Because they're too comfortable.
Yes. It removes the very friction that drives political change by smothering the workers in comfortable benefits and forced, mandatory cheer. It neutralizes any desire for political or social evolution because the workers are too comfortable to revolt, but too controlled to be truly free.
It's an eerie, almost dystopian observation. and it pushes Calvino to keep moving, to keep searching across the continent for some kind of authentic, unmanaged spark of life. So he boards a train and heads all the way to the West Coast.
A completely different vibe.
He lands in San Francisco, and immediately the tone of his diary shifts. He feels a profound breath of fresh air. He absolutely loves the steep, plunging hills, the clattering cable cars, the vibrant explosions of the Chinese New Year celebrations, and the lively community of Italian beatniks in North Beach.
He feels at home there.
He finds a European familiarity, a sense of dense, layered history in San Francisco that he hasn't felt anywhere else in the country.
But what really captures his deep analytical attention in San Francisco isn't just the bohemian coffee shops, it's the structure of the labor movement.
Which is very different from IBM.
Oh, completely. He secures a meeting at the legendary Longshoremen's Union, led by the fiercely radical labor leader Harry Bridges. Coming from Europe, where trade unions were constantly violently battling the state just for basic survival and fundamental political principles, Calvino is entirely astounded by the sheer, institutionalized prosperity of the American working class on the docks.
It completely blows his mind. He goes down to the waterfront and sees these longshoremen earning upwards of $500 a month, which was an enormous upper-middle-class sum at the time.
They're doing very well.
He watches them finish their shifts, walk out to the parking lot, and drive away in massive, gleaming luxury cars that they park right on the meticulously manicured grass outside the ultra-modern union headquarters.
Not what he expected a union to look like.
They aren't wearing rags.
Right.
They are wearing loud, brightly colored, perfectly clean overalls. The whole hiring and dispatch system, rather than being run by corrupt bosses on the docks, is managed by this massive, impartial electronic tote board.
Functioning almost exactly like a stock exchange ticker, ensuring every single man gets equal hours and equal pay.
Calvino synthesizes this observation brilliantly. He realizes that the secret of San Francisco's unique social harmony is that it is fundamentally a city of aristocracies.
Right. Everyone belongs to a powerful, well-defined elite group.
The longshoremen aren't a struggling proletariat. They are a working-class aristocracy with massive economic leverage.
And the wealthy old money families gathering in the highly exclusive Bohemian Club, surrounded by the historic heirlooms of Jack London and Mark Twain, are a cultural aristocracy.
Even the deeply rooted Italian community there, with their incredibly prosperous, well-established local businesses, form their own elite enclave. It's a prosperous, highly structured, very ordered society.
But because everyone has their fiercely protected slice of the pie, it lacks the abrasive, desperate, creative friction of a Chicago or a New York.
You can see how that rigid structure, comfortable as it is, might eventually feel a bit stifling to a writer looking for raw reality. And where do you go when you want to leave the comfortable aristocracies of San Francisco?
You go south.
You go south. Calvino travels down to Los Angeles, and here's where it gets really interesting. His relationship with L.A. is a spectacular, dramatic, love-hate roller coaster.
It really is.
Before he arrived, every intellectual he met on the East Coast warned him he would despise it. So naturally, his contrarian instinct kicks in, and he decides he's absolutely going to love it. And at first, he really does.
The scale of it impresses him.
He loves the brash, sprawling, seemingly impossible scale of it. It's so enormous, stretched out endlessly between the deserted, scrubby mountains and the vast Pacific Ocean.
But that initial contrarian enthusiasm very quickly fades into a profound, crushing sense of isolation. He starts to analyze the geography and realizes that Los Angeles is, as he beautifully puts it, a suburb of the world.
Suburb of the world, that's a great line.
The immense, unforgiving distances make spontaneous social life practically impossible. You are trapped inside the metal and glass of your car for hours just to see a friend or get a cup of coffee.
There is no functioning public transport, and more importantly, there is no real centralized downtown where people actually live and collide with one another.
He views it as a massive agglomeration of completely isolated individuals who work in very comfortable, sun-drenched conditions, but have no real organic links to one another. He ultimately concludes that to live in this earthly palm tree paradise, the terrible price you have to pay is the slow death of the soul.
The physical environment is so hostile to human connection that he actually gets stopped by the police just for using his own 2 legs.
This is one of the craziest stories.
He decides one afternoon to take a simple walk down a quiet, deserted residential street in Culver City. Within minutes, a cop on a motorcycle pulls up, blocks his path, and detains him for 15 minutes. aggressively questioning what he's doing.
Just for walking.
Because in 1960s Los Angeles, a pedestrian is inherently viewed as a highly suspicious person. The city literally rejects the unmotorized human body.
And his attempt to penetrate the famous illusions of Hollywood is equally revealing and deeply absurd. He manages to arrange a visit to the legendary 20th century Fox studios, expecting to witness the glamorous, well-oiled machinery of American cinema.
But his timing is terrible.
He happens to arrive during what the locals call tax season. In California at that time, corporate taxes were heavily assessed based on the sheer physical amount of film stock present in the state during a specific month.
So, to exploit a massive capitalist loophole and avoid paying these taxes, the massive studios simply halted all major productions and shipped millions of feet of film rolls across the border to massive warehouses in Arizona.
It's the ultimate corporate shell game. So Calvino is walking through these massive, legendary studio lots, and they are completely empty, ghost towns of false fronts.
The only thing he actually manages to see being filmed is some incredibly low-budget, B-movie science fiction flick set on a fake tropical river.
And the detail he notes about this is hilarious.
There's a guy dressed in a full cowboy outfit, standing entirely off-camera in the bushes, using a child's slingshot and a little bag of pebbles to shoot at a flock of captive ducks, desperately trying to scare them into flying across the frame right when the director yells action.
That is Calvino's grand, glamorous Hollywood experience. A bored guy in a cowboy hat with a slingshot hiding in the artificial foliage.
It's such a perfect, pathetic metaphor for the profound artificiality he felt permeated the entire West Coast. The cowboy scaring ducks is the exact opposite of the historical action he was searching for.
So he leaves.
Driven by a deep, almost desperate need to find something raw, something historically vital and unmistakably real, he completely abandons the West Coast and ventures deep into the American South. He arrives in New Orleans right in the chaotic, screaming middle of Mardi Gras.
And of course, he arrives with absolutely no hotel reservation.
Of course. He steps off the train into this chaotic, physically decaying city and miraculously manages to rent a room in a dilapidated, filthy apartment hotel right in the heart of the Vieux Carré.
He describes the entire city as looking exactly like the set of a Tennessee Williams play. Everything is sagging, disintegrating from old age, humidity, and dirt. But at the same time, it is incredibly, undeniably alive.
He notes a truly haunting Gothic detail about his specific lodgings that perfectly encapsulates the dark underbelly of the South. In a dark, sweltering closet situated right between his bedroom and the porch, a 90-year-old woman is kept locked inside all day by her family.
It's a grotesque, deeply chilling image of Southern decay and hidden cruelty. Yet, just outside his window, the streets are exploding with the massive drunken vitality of the Mardi Gras parades.
He watches the flirts go by and notes with a wry European eye that the massive papier-mâché masks and floats are actually bought secondhand from the famous Carnival in Viareggio, Italy, shipped across the ocean to be repurposed.
The whole scene in New Orleans is a bizarre, intoxicating collision of 18th century decadence, intense, sweating physical vitality, and profound, inescapable social rot.
But the decay of New Orleans is merely the prelude to the true emotional and historical core of his southern journey. This happens on March 6, 1960. Calvino leaves Louisiana and travels to Montgomery, Alabama.
This is where things get serious.
Completely unwittingly, he walks right off the bus and onto the absolute front lines of American history.
I want to slow our pace down significantly here, because this is perhaps the most profound, deeply moving moment in his entire diary, and it requires our full attention.
Absolutely.
Calvino arrives in Montgomery on a Sunday. He wanders over to the state capitol building, noting the dark historical irony that this is the exact spot where the Confederacy was originally formed. As he approaches, he finds the entire area heavily surrounded by armed police officers gripping truncheons.
And what's happening?
Inside a nearby Baptist church, hundreds of Black university students are actively preparing for a peaceful, organized protest against the recent expulsion of their classmates who had bravely tried to sit at a whites-only coffee shop.
The scene he describes outside the church is absolutely terrifying. The pavements are practically swarming with violent, highly hostile white mobs. He notes that there are the expected poor white thugs, some openly affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan. But what shocks him more is the presence of comfortable, well-dressed, middle-class white families.
Parents holding their children's hands.
All standing there collectively to mock, jeer, and hurl vicious abuse at the Black students. Calvino is standing right in the chaotic middle of this mob, a lone foreign observer witnessing the raw, ugly reality of an all-out racial war.
He watches in horror as the police systematically force any peaceful white observers or journalists away from the scene, but actively allow the violent, armed white thugs to remain in total control of the street, effectively giving them the state's blessing to intimidate.
And then the church doors open, and the black students begin to exit.
They don't run, they don't hide their faces.
Calvino watches in absolute breathless awe as young black girls walk in groups of 2s and 3s straight down the sidewalk right into the gauntlet. Their heads are held high. They're casually chatting with one another, showing absolutely zero fear, while grown white men stand directly in their path, spitting at their feet, screaming horrific obscenities, and physically trying to trip them.
He writes that the girls never alter their route, never break their stride. They walk with an incredible, transcendent dignity. Meanwhile, the white adults surrounding them don't just look angry, they burst into this hysterical, affable laughter at the abuse being hurled.
He notes that this specific phenomenon, this affable racism where people are smiling, joking, and laughing together while actively committing acts of sheer, terrifying hatred, is the most deeply unsettling and evil thing he has ever witnessed.
Remarkably, amidst this chaos, Calvino manages to get inside another church where the black students have subsequently gathered to regroup. He becomes perhaps the only white man in a sweltering room packed with 3,000 fiercely protesting students.
Because he is a foreign journalist, he is actually brought back into the sacristy for a tense Council of War meeting with the prominent leaders of the movement, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself.
Calvino observes King very closely and is deeply impressed. He doesn't just see King as a soaring spiritual mystic. He sees him as a highly lucid, incredibly decisive political tactician.
Calvino realizes, perhaps for the first time, that nonviolence isn't just a passive moral stance or a religious platitude.
It is a brilliantly controlled, highly pragmatic political strategy forged by the unimaginably harsh, oppressive conditions of the segregated South. It is the only weapon that can expose the brutality of the oppressor without giving the state the excuse it desperately wants to use lethal force.
It is a moment of pure, undeniable historical gravity. And as a reminder to you, our listener, we are sharing Calvino's firsthand, visceral observations of a deeply fractured, violently divided society. We're looking strictly through the lens of a foreign intellectual, desperately trying to process the intense racial war of the American South.
We report this impartially, strictly as he documented the terrible tension and the unbelievable bravery he witnessed on those streets.
Witnessing this massive life-or-death struggle for justice in America actually deeply connects to Calvino's own past, bringing his entire worldview full circle.
And this brings us to the final major text in our deep dive today, his essay, Political Autobiography of a Young Man. To truly understand exactly why Calvino was so profoundly moved by the bravery of those black students in Montgomery, we have to look closely at his own coming of age under the shadow of a brutal totalitarian regime.
Exactly. Calvino didn't just read about fascism in a textbook. He grew up right in the middle of fascist Italy. But as we mentioned earlier, his parents were fiercely secular, highly rational, anti-fascist scientists.
Right.
His mother, in particular, was so morally uncompromising that she explicitly, formally requested that Calvino be entirely exempt from the mandatory religious mass at his public school. Now, in a deeply conformist, aggressively fascist, and overwhelmingly Catholic society, this simple act made Calvino a complete and total outcast.
He spent his entire childhood waiting alone in the empty, echoing school hallways during religious instruction, constantly being interrogated by his peers about what kind of strange, heretical religion his family belonged to.
His parents' rigid, unyielding moral stance profoundly isolated him from his peers. As a teenager navigating this terrifying political landscape, his primary psychological coping mechanism was to develop a thick, impenetrable shell of cynical, provincial toughness.
He and his small circle of friends prided themselves on being utterly unsentimental, dripping with irony, and completely detached from the world around them.
They spent their days playing snooker in smoky cafes, acting like tough guys, and dismissing all forms of politics entirely. They genuinely believed that the world was hopelessly, systemically corrupt, that Italy would be dominated forever by Mussolini's fascism, and that the only conceivable way to survive with your mind intact was to endlessly mock it and aggressively ignore it.
It was a very specific form of political indifference born not of laziness, but of total, crushing pessimism.
But then, the brutal reality of history crashed right through that cynical, protective shell. In 1943, Mussolini's government fell, and shortly after, the terrifying reality of the German military occupation of Italy began.
That snarky detachment was suddenly no longer a viable option.
The war wasn't a theoretical debate in a cafe anymore. It was a bloody, desperate, daily fight for physical survival. Calvino finally left his provincial, isolated bubble, grabbed a weapon, and joined the communist-led Garibaldi partisan brigades, physically fighting in the very same Ligurian woods he had peacefully hunted in as a boy.
The stakes of this decision were unimaginably high. His own mother, the woman who had isolated him to protect his mind, was actually taken hostage by the SS and the vicious local fascist militia.
She was subjected to horrific psychological torture, including mock executions where the fascists literally pretended to shoot Calvino's father right in front of her eyes to break her spirit.
Yet, remarkably, she remained completely unbroken, continually finding ways to smuggle messages to her sons in the mountains, encouraging them to keep fighting for justice. For Calvino, joining the resistance completely shattered his lifelong isolation. In the freezing woods, he discovered a completely new stratum of society, the tough, uneducated working class and the subproletariat fighting and dying right alongside him.
So we have to ask, what does it actually mean for a cynical, bookish kid to suddenly drop his irony, pick up a rifle, and join the Garibaldi brigades? Why did he specifically align with the Communist Party?
He didn't join because he sat down in a library and read a bunch of dense, theoretical Marxist texts. He joined because, after a lifetime of waiting in the hallway, he craved action. The communists were simply the most ruthlessly organized, highly active, and effective military force actually fighting the fascists in the mountains.
This race is the central, defining ideological tug-of-war of Calvino's entire adult life.
Yeah.
How does one balance the fiery, righteous desire to completely tear down a corrupt, evil system with the grim, practical need to actually build and manage a new one?
Calvino writes movingly that he constantly, painfully oscillated between two distinct political poles. On one side was anarchism, the burning romantic desire to absolutely smash unjust institutions, to wipe the slate entirely clean, and to allow human truth and freedom to flourish naturally, entirely without the suffocating control of the state.
And pulling him on the exact opposite side was communism. The cold, hard realization that you can't just destroy. You have to organize to survive. You have to build a rational, functioning future, even if that means accepting the incredibly heavy costs, the inherent risks of concentrated authority, and the rigid, sometimes brutal discipline required to actually govern a society and protect vulnerable people from sliding back into fascism.
He was agonizingly, tragically aware of the dark realities of this choice. In his autobiography, he openly and painfully wrestles with the horrific realities of Stalinism. The brutal purges, the terrifying show trials, the devastating betrayal of the Soviet-German pact.
He makes a profound, highly uncomfortable confession. He admits that his specific generation of intellectuals sometimes actively justified or willfully ignored these massive atrocities out of a naive, desperate, and ultimately tragic belief that they were merely temporary, necessary missteps on the incredibly long, difficult road to ultimate human progress.
It's a profound, chilling confession of the devastating moral compromises required when you commit yourself entirely to the grinding machinery of history.
So looking back at all of this, what does this massive journey all mean? We have traveled an immense, dizzying distance today. We started in the quiet, rigidly moral hills of Liguria and the industrial fog of Turin. We crossed the ocean to stare up at the electric gray skyscrapers of New York and wandered the sterile, deeply paternalistic halls of the IBM factory.
We felt the alienating, decentralized sprawl of the Midwest, the comfortable, wealthy aristocracies of San Francisco, and the soulless, hyper-motorized void of Los Angeles.
And finally, we stood on the sweltering pavement in Montgomery, Alabama, watching the terrifying, incredibly brave reality of history being made in real time.
I think what Calvino showed us is that to truly understand your own identity, your own deeply held political and moral core, sometimes you have to completely immerse yourself in an alien culture. You have to force yourself to look at it with wide-open, unblinking eyes, refusing to look away from either its miracles or its horrors.
The immense value of this traveler's lens is that physically stepping out of our daily, comfortable routine allows us to finally see the massive systemic flaws, the hidden structural poverty, and the bubbling, urgent revolutions that we might otherwise completely ignore in our own backyards.
Calvino's American journey wasn't just a physical road trip across a continent. It was a mirror reflecting the fundamental, tearing struggles of the entire 20th century.
I want to leave you with a final, highly provocative thought to carry with you. Calvino deeply observed that the sheer relentless speed of American consumerism, the endless rows of flapping flags at used car lots, the deeply isolating disposable TV dinners, the flashing, frictionless electronic stock markets, created a society that was utterly, completely obsessed with the present moment, effectively severing its deep, necessary ties to the past.
It's true.
If Italo Calvino were somehow able to take a road trip through our hyper-connected, artificially intelligent, algorithm-driven world today, what seemingly mundane daily habit of yours do you think you would pinpoint as the ultimate terrifying symbol of our era's hidden anxieties?
It's a fascinating, slightly unsettling question to mull over as you go about your day.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope you enjoyed the journey as much as we did. Keep questioning the world around you.